Good evening, everyone. So we were talking last night a little bit about when we don't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, which falls on Shabbat. We get to it tonight. I want to talk about when the shofar was blown on Rosh Hashanah, which falls out on Shabbat. If you think we have controversies nowadays, wait till you hear what happened in Jerusalem 120 years ago. It was quite explosive. So hopefully we'll get that. But just again to build up the background and the context. So we mentioned last night, again, it's now universal practice that Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbat, can only be the first day. The second day of Rosh Hashanah won't be on Shabbat because Rosh Hashanah can't, in our calendar, can't fall out on a Friday. So this can only apply to the first day. For the first day Shabbat, we don't blow the shofar. According to the Yerushalmi, this is a din d'oraita from the Torah because it says Yom Teruah and Zichron Teruah, to represent two separate things. We still have a hint to this in our tefillot, but nonetheless, the way that we paskin like the Gemara, like the Bavli, and this is the way the Rambam and all the Rishonim and the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch and everybody paskins like this is from the Torah. Really, there was still a mitzvah. There is still a mitzvah to blow the shofar even on Shabbat. But Chachamim came along and said, no, Rabbi made a gzerah that somebody somewhere is going to go and maybe carry the shofar through the Reshut Rabim for Amot to learn how to blow on Rosh Hashanah. Same thing with Lulav, same thing with Megillah, and therefore all of Am Yisrael has to lose out on the mitzvah of shofar in that year. Again, it's not a simple thing. It's not a trivial thing that Chazal came and cancelled the mitzvah of Tekiat shofar. Right? It says in the Gemara, it says Kol Shana shelo tokin b'tchilata meri'in b'sofa. Any year in which you don't have the Tekiat shofar at the beginning, meri'in b'sofa, you'll cry out at the end. Meaning it's a bad omen. I saw today actually the Aruch Laner once gave a drasha. And he went through, he stood up in, on Rosh Hashanah, he went through and he did the calculation of all the years historically in which different significant historical events had taken place for Am Yisrael. And he found something amazing. He said many of the years in which calamities had taken place, but also many of the years in which good things had taken place, Rosh Hashanah that year had been on Shabbat. So he worked out that the year of the Churban by Drishon, Churban by Jani, Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbat. He said also Hakamat HaMishkan, Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbat. So there's something auspicious. There's some potential. There's something there. The fact that we don't have the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, not a trivial matter. Yet Chazal were willing to give it up in order to prevent this Chilul Shabbat. Again, we spoke about it last night at the end. I still don't have really a satisfactory answer. Why? Such an outlandish, such a far-fetched case is enough for Chazal to say there won't be Tekiat shofar. But what we can learn from it, I guess we can learn something about the importance of Shabbat. We can learn something about the importance of sacrifice. That Chazal said we'll sacrifice our own mitzvah in order to save another Jew. But anyway, there are a number of interesting questions which come out of it. The Rishonim, the Achronim ask many questions on this Gemara. So, for example, if you're saying the reason is that we don't blow the shofar is because Shema Yavirenu Arbam, because maybe somebody somewhere is going to go and carry the shofar. Okay, we have lots of gzeirot which Chazal made. Shema will cancel. So you aren't allowed to do X because you might come to do Y. So some of them Mepharshim suggest there's a much more commonplace gzeirah that you could have made here. Why do you have to go so far to say on Shabbat make Shiur? We know that ordinarily on Shabbat there's a gzeirah. We can't play musical instruments. Why? Playing the musical instrument is not an isur d'oraita, but it would be an isur d'oraita to fix a musical instrument. And because this was commonplace, this is one of the sugyot. We get into the whole discussion where you have a gzeirah of Chazal, and the reasoning no longer applies. Nowadays, if somebody's playing a musical instrument, it's unlikely they're going to go there and then and start fixing it. But nonetheless, the gzeirah was made, and that is so. The shofar, which is a clay shear of a certain type, right? We know there's long discussions in the Gemara, shofar that has a hole in it, shofar that has a crack in it, etc. Is it kosher, width, length, width, etc. So why don't we say the Chazal were worried that on Shabbat the shofar might break? This is far more likely, especially in older times. Nowadays everything is more mehudar, and you have the shofar. You have 10 shofarot in reserve. Once upon a time, it wasn't like that. You had one shofar for the entire community. If it broke, you'd have to fix it. So why don't we say Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah, which falls out on Shabbat? There's no Tekiat shofar. Shema yitaken kli Shiur, because you might fix the shofar. So I know what you're going to say. I think, which is the answer which is given, is that wait a minute, that would apply not just uniquely to Shabbat, that would apply to Yom Tov as well. So if you're going to say that we're worried you might come to fix the shofar, that would mean that we would have to uproot the entire mitzvah of Tekiat shofar ever, and that is a little bit much. That Chazal we're not going to do. Another question which is raised is, okay, it's uniquely to do with carrying, with Hotza'ah, because that is something which you can do on Yom Tov, but you cannot do on Shabbat. Now, not everybody agrees with that. What about Beit Shammai? Beit Shammai is machloket in the Gemara Beitza between the Mishnah, between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say, on Yom Tov, you're allowed to perform malachot. Everybody says you're allowed to perform malachot of ochel nefesh, malacha which is involved in food preparation. Say Beit Hillel, once a certain malacha is allowed, because you could do it for food preparation, you could do it for another reason as well. Therefore, you could carry a shofar, even though it's not for food preparation. You could carry a lulav. Beit Shammai disagree. Beit Shammai say, no, it's not food preparation. You can't carry it. So again, we seem stuck. Once we have this gzeirah, it would seem to be that according to Beit Shammai, you can't blow the shofar. So one answer is we paskin like Beit Hillel, not like Beit Shammai. But it's also seen a little bit unreasonable to suggest that Beit Shammai did not have the mitzvah of Tekiat shofar. We could say, something the version explain, is that there is still a difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov. Yom Tov is an Isur Lav, Shabbat is an Isur Skila, and therefore we're worried here that a person may transgress accidentally. The transgressing accidentally on Shabbat is much more severe than on Yom Tov. Somebody asked me yesterday the following question: what about this? We said Chazal were willing to uproot the mitzvah of Shofar. They were willing to uproot the mitzvah of Lulav. They're willing to uproot the mitzvah of Megillah in order that you don't come to accidentally transgress Shabbat. All these mitzvot, when they occur on Shabbat, Chazal said don't do them on Shabbat. So what about Brit Milah? Brit Milah, which occurs on Shabbat, we know, we learned out from the Psukim, that the Brit Milah itself is Docher Shabbat, but all the preparation and the other activities which take place prior would not necessarily. There are some very interesting contemporary tshuvot that talk about this. They say, what if you have a situation where, as a result of the Brit Milah, there's going to be a lot of Chilul Shabbat. People are going to drive. People are going to, having the Brit Milah in the same way. So the question is like this: in the same way that you can't perform, preparatory work for the Milah itself. If the Milah is going to cause directly, it's going to cause lots of Chilul Shabbat, which is not directly related to the Milah. It's related to people driving and people taking photographs and whatever it would be. Would that be a reason to postpone the Brit Milah? As you can imagine, the answer is machloket. There is, I think it's the Tzit Eliezer who says, no, you would still have it on time in different ways. And I didn't have time to check it up now, but I think the Shevet HaLevi says you would actually postpone the Brit Milah in such a case. There is such a view. I think the more common view is not to postpone it and politely ask people not to drive or to take photographs. But the question is this: if we are willing to uproot Shabbat, we're willing to uproot Shofar because of Shabbat, why don't we say that when it comes to Brit Milah, here you're not uprooting the mitzvah, you would just postpone it to the next day. Postpone it to the next day, because somebody might come to carry the knife in Reshut HaRabim or whatever it may be. So there, the answer the Mefarshim give is the following. I quoted the Gemara yesterday, I quoted the Rambam. What the Rambam brought this line at the end, which the Gemara brings at the beginning, which is, Hakol chayavin b'tkiya ve'en hakol b'kiyin litkoa. Everybody's chayav in Tekiat. Why did the Gemara have to say that? We know that. That's obvious. Why did it stress that? So maybe the point is this: that when it comes to Brit Milah, Chazal weren't concerned. There's one person who is going to be concerned, and he's going to do the Brit Milah, so he won't think about it, and he'll carry the knife through Reshut HaRabim or whatever it is. Everybody else is going to say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you Reshut HaRabim? Why are you carrying? They'll stop him. They'll be able to tell him. Whereas by Rosh Hashanah, by Shofar, everybody is part of this mitzvah. People wouldn't think twice. You see somebody with a shofar, or you want to, you're in that mindset as well in terms of trying to fulfill that mitzvah, and therefore you may not stop, you may not think. That is that's one of the distinctions that is brought. Another question which is raised, I alluded to this briefly yesterday as well, which is that nowadays, according to many poskim, there are those who say, you find this language quite common in the Achronim, that that there is a view that nowadays that we don't have a Reshut HaRabim from the Torah in nearly all of the world. Why? because there is a view that one of the conditions for a Reshut Rabim from the Torah is that you have 600,000 people passing through that area every single day. And if you don't have that, so it's not a Reshut Rabim, it would therefore be a Karmelit, which means you would be not be allowed to carry Midrabanan, but Midoraita you'd be allowed to carry. So does it make sense to uproot a mitzvah Deoraita for a concern that somebody's going to carry when there is no concern that one is going to carry Midoraita, because there is no Reshut Rabim? And there again, the answer is that when the Gezerah was established, that there was, and therefore that doesn't change. So those are some of the discussions that I mentioned as a result of this idea. But we said yesterday also, and where all of this begins, is that the Mishnah tells us that Yom Tov Shel Shana shechal liot b'Shabbat. So we don't blow the shofar b'Medina. It says tokim b'Mikdash, aval lo tokim b'Medina. In the Beit HaMikdash, you can and still do and fulfill the mitzvah of Tekiat Shofar, but in the Medina, which is not the Mikdash, we don't. And then the Mishnah goes on, talks about what happened after the Churban. Very, very interesting. There is a machloket on just about every word of this Mishnah. So the first thing is, when the Mishnah says Mikdash and Medina, what does it mean? What is it talking about? So you'll say, well, Mikdash means Mikdash, and Medina means everywhere else. That is how Rashi understands. Rashi understands when it says you blow the shofar in the Mikdash, it means in the Beit HaMikdash itself. You've got the Sanhedrin there, you've got the Shkat HaGazit, that is where, but anywhere else, including in the rest of the city of Yerushalayim, there was no shofar on Shabbat the same way that it is now. The Rambam disagrees. The Rambam says that when it says Mikdash in the Mishnah, Mikdash means the city of Yerushalayim. So therefore, at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, according to the Rambam, you could blow the shofar throughout Yerushalayim, but anywhere else you could not. It turns out when you see the continuation of the Mishnah, it turns out a little bit more difficult for Rashi than for the Rambam, because the Mishnah then seems to indicate that after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, that there was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a decree that you could still blow the shofar in wherever you had a Beit Din, a fixed Beit Din. The question is, what kind of Beit Din are we talking about? Does Beit Din mean, again, there are many, many opinions here. Does Beit Din mean the Sanhedrin Agdolah of 71? Does it mean the smaller Beit Din of 23? Does it mean that they have to be Dayanim Smuchim, the sort of Beit Din which you could use for Kiddush HaChodesh? Does it mean you could have a Beit Din of 3? What about the Beit Din we have here on Erev Rosh Hashanah for Atarat Nedarim? Is that good enough? You put together 3. You're shaking your head, but you'll find there is actually an opinion, a very significant opinion, one of the Rishonim, called the Rif, you may have heard of him, who held that when it says that you can blow the shofar in front of any Beit Din, he said even a Beit Din of 3, any Beit Din is good enough. And we find that after, many centuries later, after the Mishnah, the Rif was still blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, on Shabbat, which fell on Rosh Hashanah. That's not the controversy, though. The controversy comes a little bit later, but we'll discuss more about that tomorrow. So Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael, lefichach ba'alei mitzvot, shnei ma'adanei chavetz man tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir.